Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. Well, here it is. It's technically Sunday because I do my filming on Sunday, and I've already filmed Monday and Tuesday, and you can tell my voice is a little bit weak again. I probably should have taken a break and done this on Tuesday, but nonetheless, this is what it is. I'm going to try and make it through this because sharing some really, really important stuff here on Colossians chapter 2, 14 to 17. The argument is, as I've already shared with you, well, Paul said that the ceremonial feast days, the Passover, Feast of Weeks, unleavened bread, all of those with their bloody animal sacrifices and what have you, all of those were nailed to the cross. They were taken out of the way. Now, strangely enough, those who make that argument turn around and they contradict themselves. And I'll try to illustrate that as I continue. But as I've already pointed out, in Colossians chapter 2, 14 to 17, Paul absolutely does not say that the ceremonial feast days had been nailed to the cross. As I pointed out yesterday, when Paul's talking about the handwriting of ordinances as translated in the New King James and what have you, the handwriting of, or the certificate of debt, of the New American Standard, he's talking about the handwriting of debt incurred through violation of the law, not the law itself. And as I pointed out yesterday, I've had a lot of my Sabbatarian friends, when I point out that Paul was not saying that the law had been nailed to the cross, they just almost, amen, Don, amen, amen. But wait a minute. When they think they've made a point, Paul wasn't talking about the law being nailed to the cross, that would mean, in the context, that the new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths had not been nailed to the cross. Because, after all, if you're going to argue that all that Paul was saying in Colossians chapter 2 was that the ceremonial feast days had been nailed to the cross, had been taken out of the way, and then you're going to basically jump on me and say, see, Don Preston said it wasn't the law that was removed. It was the debt of sin that was removed. Yay, the law wasn't removed. Well, if the law wasn't removed, then the new moons, feast days, and the Sabbaths were not removed. You can't have it both ways. Either the law was removed or it wasn't. In Colossians chapter 2, Paul does not say the law had been removed. And someone may step up and say, well, Don, are you saying that the new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths remain valid, therefore? No, just the opposite. You see, folks, a word about hermeneutic here. I consider that one of the greatest interpretive fallacies, one of the greatest problems in understanding the Bible is anachronism. What in the world is that, right? Great big fancy word. Anachronism is taking something from a given period of time that was true at a given period of time and applying it at a different period of time. Now, are there eternal truths that are true no matter when? Sure, God is love, okay? But let me give a graphic illustration, a dramatic illustration that I think everyone can relate to, and that is God told Noah, build an ark. Oh, well, that means, hey, I gotta go out and build an ark. Why did Noah build an ark? Because there's a flood coming. Oh, okay, that means I've got to build an ark in my backyard because a flood's coming. And you go, Preston, oh, come on, Preston. That's silly. Yes, it is. But you see, we come to passages, and let me illustrate this again. I consider that what I consider to be an abominable movement called the Israel-only movement, one of the fundamental fallacies of that movement is anachronism. They go to passages like Amos chapter 3 You and you only, speaking of Israel, have I known of all the nations of the earth. See, God only chose Israel. Well, that's right. He did at that time. They go to Matthew 15:24, in which Jesus said to the Samaritan woman, Syrophoenician woman, who was begging to be helped with her issue of blood. And Jesus said, well, it's not right to give the food of the children to dogs. And the woman astutely observed, well, that's true, Lord, but even the dogs eat of the crumbs that fall from the children's table. But Jesus had told her, I am not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Oh, well, you see, that means today. Folks, this is anachronism. And it fails to consider that Christ was sent to Israel to fulfill Israel's promises, but part of Israel's promises was that salvation would then be offered to the world. But the abominable Israel-only view says, no, if Jesus says he was only sent to the house of Israel, then he could nothing that he has could ever, ever, ever be for non-Israel people. That is the extreme of anachronism. So, anachronism comes to play in Colossians chapter 2. Okay? Speaking of the new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, Paul said, and listen, not enough translations render this properly, but the Greek is clear, it's undeniable, it's not even disputable. Notice what Paul says. Verse 17. Again, New American Standard. Speaking of those new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, Paul said, which are a mere shadow of the things that are to come. Okay, what does the word "are" mean? It's a present tense. In other words, when Paul wrote in 62 AD, the new moons, the feast days, and the Sabbaths were, from our perspective, but are, from his perspective, still shadows. They were still foreshadowing, and this is where the New American Standard misses it, and a variety of different commentators and scholars, Greek scholars, point out that the proper translation, Scott McKnight does it in his commentary, and a host of other translations, render the verse, they are the shadows of the good things that are about to come. Now, let me suggest you get on the internet, you look up Robert Mounce, Greek scholar, world-recognized Greek scholar, and you look up his comments on the Greek word mellow. And Robert Mounce notes the meaning of mellow, especially with the infinitive, means about to come, on the point of being. Now look, I didn't make this up. Preterists didn't make this up. Worldwide scholars, and you can quote everyone from Dale Allison, W.D. Davies, N.T. Wright, on and on and on and on. None of whom are preterists, but who recognize that the meaning of mellow, and by the way, even Gary DeMar has done some good work on this relatively recently, so go to World Vision and look up Gary DeMar's comments on mellow. He understands that mellow in the infinitive means about to be on the point of doing something. So how does that affect our understanding of Colossians chapter 2? Well, in the following way. Paul says these new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths are, when Paul wrote in 62 AD, they are mere shadows of the good things about to come. In other words, the typological foreshadowing significance and meaning. And let's not forget this. In the Septuagint of Leviticus chapter 23, All of the feast days are called convocations. The word convocation means rehearsal, preparing for the real thing. Listen, that's what Paul's saying in Colossians chapter 2. Paul is saying the new moons and the feast days and the Sabbaths were types, they were shadows, they were rehearsals of the good things. When were the good things going to come? Well, unfortunately, the New American Standard doesn't render it as it should have, as about to be. I believe it's the New King James translation, number 3, 2 or 3. I believe it's the New Revised Standard Bible. I can get a list of all of them if anyone's interested in that. But the point of it is, folks, that major translations, major commentators, major Greek scholars all agree that Paul was saying that those new moons and the feast days and the Sabbaths were shadows. They, quote, are shadows when Paul wrote, not from our perspective. They are shadows of the good things that were, when he wrote, about to come. That means they were imminent. That means Paul was not saying, oh, well, those final 3 feast days, they'll be fulfilled one day by and by, 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000, maybe a millennium away. No, they were about to be fulfilled. Now, what I'm going to do next is to demonstrate that these final 3 feast days of Israel, what are known as the eschatological feast days of Israel, that are either explicitly found in Colossians chapter 2 or implicitly found there. I'm going to show you that beginning at Pentecost, from Pentecost onward, in the time of the writing of the New Testament books, each one of those last 3 feast days and what they represented, what they foreshadowed, what they rehearsed, was in fact imminent in the first century. Not imminent from our perspective, but from their perspective, and thereby demonstrate how dangerous anachronism is when we when we come to Colossians chapter 2 and we have Paul saying, oh, well, those feast days are still shadows of good things about to come. No, that's wrong. It's anachronistic. We must put Paul's present tense verbs in the proper context of about to come. And like I said, I'm going to show you that from the New Testament perspective, the fulfillment of those final 3 feast days truly was imminent when Paul wrote and when the New Testament writers wrote. So you don't want to miss that. In the meantime, be sure to join me on Friday when I'll continue my review of the book, The Future of Rome. And then, Lord willing, my voice holds out. Surely it will. Hope so. Mike Sullivan and I will be back at it again with preterist apologetics. So be looking forward to that. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you then.